What's going on, folks? This is Matt here for Dark One Linux Tech Game, where this is the fusion of Linux technology and gaming. And we are going to be looking at a video from BritTech 09, and it's titled Things to Know Before Switching to Linux. So this is kind of my reaction. I've never watched this guy's content personally. I know there's been I might have done a reaction, maybe. It's been a while since I've done some reactions to a lot of people. I want to see what he actually has to say. If it's full of dumb, if it's full of stupid, if it's opinion, it's all subjective. I tend to find a lot of the times with these videos, but let's roll into it and see what he has to say.
What you guys, got another video here for you. Today we're taking a look at what Windows users need to know before you jump ship to Linux and leave Windows behind. Now, quite a few people have left Windows and they've moved over to Linux, and I'm going to give you some of the things to watch out for before you make that final leap. So let's talk about number one first, which is Windows is not like Linux, or Linux is not like Windows, whatever way you want to put it. They are two completely different operating systems and they work in a different way. So if you're looking for an operating system in Linux or a distro in Linux that is going to look and feel like Windows, then you might be mistaken and jump ship to an operating system that you think is going to act and feel like Windows, when really it's nothing like Windows whatsoever. You are going to need to learn a completely different new operating system because it doesn't work in the same way as Windows does. That is the first thing that you need to understand. Okay, let's move on to number two.
So he's right. Linux is not Windows. This is why I'm always wary of when I hear people call it a drop-in replacement for Windows or Mac OS. It's fucking not. So he makes, that's a totally valid point. We as the evangelists, and I hate that fucking religious terminology bullshit, when it comes to the people that are talking about Linux, the tech enthusiasts that enjoy Linux and find it useful, need to understand that not everybody is fit for Linux, and Linux isn't fit for everybody. Just like Windows isn't fit for everybody and Mac OS isn't fit for everybody. We have to stop overselling it and under delivering, because if they go in expecting Mac OS or Windows type of experience, they're going to be disappointed when it's not anything like they are familiar with. You can give similarities, but you have to explain that these are alternatives. Alternatives mean differences. This is where words actually, like, the words we use set up the expectation of what to expect. Because if you tell someone that it's an alternative, it's like, oh, it'll be similar, but it might be different. The expectation is more leveled. So when things crop up, they're not getting hit in the faces of, why doesn't it work like Windows? You sold it like Windows, and it's not. So valid point on point one. I have no idea how many points he has. It's a 10-minute video, so I'm going to try to keep these rolling fairly quickly.
Number two, which is programs. A lot of the programs that you're used to using on Windows are just not going to work on Linux, and that's just the way it is. Now, there is workarounds where you can use Wine and things like that, or virtual machines, to get things working inside Linux. But again, if you're already thinking about ways to get that working on Linux, then maybe don't jump to Linux in the first place. That's my opinion. Linux has come on leaps and bounds over the years, but some programs like Adobe products just cannot be installed in that way. You can use the cloud-based versions, which are having to go through Wine and things like that. But if you're looking for installing programs, it's not going to work the way it does on Windows. So you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get it to work. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't alternatives out there which are pretty good, like GIMP and LibreOffice. If you're using these applications, then these are not industry standard applications, which means a lot of companies are not hiring GIMP specialists. They're hiring people that are trained in Photoshop and other Adobe products. So bear that in mind if you're putting all your time and energy into learning something like that and expecting it to carry you somewhere in the IT world, because it's just not. Okay, so let's talk about...
If you're looking to switch, my suggestion, bar none, most users, most end users, most people who, jump around on different cell phones from iOS to Android or whatever. It's as bad as it is, it's the app's stupid for most, lowest common denominator, Windows users, Mac users, OS users in general. It's just the program stupid. That's really what it boils down to. And I'm not calling BritTech here on this reasoning stupid. I'm just saying the best way to go about easing the transition is get them on the shit that they're on the OS they're already on, because you can make the underlying OS even matter less. So they run into less problems because there's stuff on there that they already know. So if they want big data companies, go download Google Chrome, go, insert thing here. And that's fine. That's their choice. But present them with the options on their current platform, and you can be like, oh, that thing you use, it's available over here too. So, and then when you've already set the expectation of, by using the words alternative, which I did like that he used, instead of drop in replacement and he used alternative, you've already leveled the expectation to them. Then you can surprise them by being like, oh, this insert application here runs on that OS as well. Stuff like that matters because it's like it ticks off one more box that doesn't give them a reason to switch back because it has what they need.
Talk about the next one, which is hardware. So Windows is blessed with having lots of support for all different types of hardware. The manufacturers that create that hardware release drivers for that hardware and then release it to all the Windows users. Now, unfortunately, because Linux is Linux, they don't get that privilege, and sometimes some hardware manufacturers just don't release the drivers for a Linux operating system, and that can be a bit problematic. That means it might not work correctly. Now, there might be a workaround that you can find online to get it working, but unfortunately, Linux is not the problem here. It's the hardware manufacturers that release this hardware that don't release drivers for that particular hardware, and it just doesn't work. Moving on to number 4, and that.
So here he's not wrong. We see this generally. We don't see it as much as we used to. We still see it. But what I will say is that you're going to find that regardless of the OS, there's hardware that Windows no longer supports, that Linux does. There's stuff that is no longer supported on Mac OS. There's shit I've bought for the MacBook with USB-C ain't working on Mac OS. So the OS and hardware, it's all dependent again on the hardware OEMs on them. It really is. So I'm not going to slag on Linux like he doesn't, because it's true. Now, if you buy a piece of hardware and it specifies, and if it specifies support and it doesn't work, then there's a problem. Then you have every right as a customer to bitch, complain, and tell them, hey, fix your shit if you're supporting the platform, supposedly. Totally valid criticism there. So, what I will say is from certain hardware, like if you want the full everything that NVIDIA offers, as an example, was a broadcaster and all the other AI stuff, you're not going to get a lot of the software end of stuff on Linux from NVIDIA, from like the content creator perspective. So if that stuff's important to you, it's going to matter. But on the same note, there are also alternatives to the lack of those things. Like in Linux specifically, I believe it's RN. Was it RN noise? I believe is the one we generally use. But you also have things like the name escapes me at the moment, but noise torch or whatever it's being called now, that give you kind of the same idea of what you would benefit from some of those NVIDIA products. That's just one example. So I get what he's saying, but a lot of it, again, does boil down to OEMs and them actually supporting platforms besides fucking Windows. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't realize, like, Android's Linux. Shocking take, I know. But end of the day, he's not wrong. So it's an OEM thing. It's a hardware manufacturer thing, to which all I'm going to say is hardware manufacturers, make your shit OS agnostic. Ironically, this new controller is OS agnostic. Maybe I could try to learn a fucking thing or two from some third-party game companies.
And that is, things will break on Linux just like any other OS. As much as all of these Linux fanboys will tell you in the comments section, just use Linux, it does break. And you're going to have to be patient and learn how to fix things, because you may get a piece of hardware that's not working correctly, or there might be some other little issue with it, or you just may have a major problem with it. It's going to break at some point, and it just does, like every other operating system. So the only thing I can say is use their website, use their community, because it is community based, and you can try to get some help there. But you might not find it as helpful as what you would get on the Windows side of things. There's a lot of people that use Windows compared to Linux, and it just seems to be a lot more answers out there to fix a lot of problems compared to what Linux is. And what I've found is the Linux users are quite arrogant, and this pushes people away from the platform, in my opinion. They have this elite.
Not sure if it's going into another point, but as far as the help stuff, Windows has a bigger audience, so yeah, it's going to run into more problems. Bigger audience, more more bug reports. This is always the conundrum. More users, more bug reports, because you're using the application or shit, and the way developers and et cetera didn't plan for. Just as any game developer that has a huge hit of a game, and they end up with shit that people didn't think they would do. So there's that. It's relative as far as the help and that kind of stuff. Yeah, your shit's going to break regardless of your OS, Mac, Windows, Linux. Insert OS here and insert problem after OS, and you'll find plenty of, insert search engine results here kind of deal. You really will. So again, it's setting the expectation. It really is. And piling I don't want to say the narrative, but piling the expectation to that level of where it actually really is. So he's not wrong there either. As far as getting help, it's all forms based. But then again, what I will say is 90% of the time, if you're looking for answers yourself, in be it Google or whatever search engine you want to fucking use, you're going to be in a forum in some way, shape, or form, and it just doesn't really fucking matter if it's Linux or Windows or Mac OS, realistically. So the support's there, just like any other OS. The information and the way to fix it might seem a little more technical. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it really isn't. So again, it's just like any other OS.
Elitist attitude, and this is normally coming from recent converts from Windows to Linux, and you generally get a lot of bad behavior in comment sections of YouTube videos, of Windows videos and things like that. And I think they think that they are special, and now they're drawing people to Linux by being like that, when really you're just pushing people away. Now, also the way you install your applications in the package manager here, you can go and open this.
Okay, so he's kind of jumping around. As far as the Linux elitism stuff, I've talked about this before. The RTFM people, read the fucking manual. I will also equate the distro bias of people and their recommendations. That tends to be something I've noticed. If instead of tailoring the recommendations, because it's a community-based thing, as we always talk about, instead of tailoring the recommendations to the fucking person we're making the recommendation to, we tailor them to what we expect. You got to flip that perspective. You really do, and people don't. If they are somebody who, computers are a tool, they're not overly technical nor care to be overly technical when it comes to a fucking using a tool. They just want the tool to do its job. Then probably not recommending like Nix OS or Linux from scratch or Gentoo or Arch. Probably not the best fucking way to go about it. Give them an Ubuntu or some type of, user-friendly focused distro that caters more to that demographic. Funny. Other people will say distro choices don't matter and distros don't matter. You'll find demographics fucking do, though. So that's the one thing I will make a recommendation for. Just recommend the right fucking distros and keep your personal preferences out of it. I'm not a Linux Mint guy. Haven't been in a long, long time. I'll still recommend Linux Mint. I'm not an Ubuntu guy. I'll still recommend Ubuntu. I'm not a Fedora guy, but I'll still recommend a Fedora. So it's all relative.
Open this up and open up the command center here and basically download the application straight onto the system. You can see here, there's a big list of them here. You can do a search, you can search by all, or you can search for must-have apps or hot apps, and you can search for these and just click on install, and it will go off and download these and install them onto the actual operating system, which is a really nice feature for Linux. So this is a different experience compared to what you're going to get on Windows. The same thing can be said for updates for the operating system as well now.
So what I will say is the best way to equate it is for people that are coming to Linux from the package manager's end of things. Generally, despite whatever GUI, storefront, etc., we stick in front of them. I will honestly say that I think Deepin and there's a few others that have a very, very well-designed app store. Most distros just don't ship with them. But for me, the best way to sell it is to get the people to understand the mobile experience. Click install, click updates, all that stuff is all right there. And that's where they can pull knowledge from and have their expectations can be looked at in a similar way of like, oh, I click install and it installs the app. That's what they need to know. So again, it's tempering the expectations with real expectations and drawing on what is comparable, but making them understand just because it's comparable, using the right wording. This is where wording does have keys, and telling it it's an alternative, and then because they're going to understand that alternative means differences. And let's be real, 90% of people aren't going to go and use the fucking Windows Store. Most of them go to a website and download an exe or whatever. That's just how Windows generally operates. UWP died a long time ago, and honestly, good fucking riddance. So, again, Apple users will be more accustomed to the way Linux works just because of the Unix underpinning and the way apps are installed generally. So that really doesn't matter because that's cross-pollination for them. So,
well, now these can also be downloaded in the terminal as well. But basically, this makes it a lot easier for installing applications. Now, moving on to the next biggest question, which is going to be gaming. Can it replace your Windows-based system to play all your favorite games without any problems at all? And the short answer to that is no, it can't. But they have come on leaps and bounds, and you can play games on Linux. And over 80% of games can be played on Linux, apparently, according to their stats. And, in my personal opinion, if you're looking for a operating system to replace a Windows gaming system, then don't bother replacing it with Linux because it's not quite there yet. And you might get the odd issue with your particular system. You can see here some people are having issues and some people are putting the thumbs up and saying they're having no problems whatsoever. So again,
okay, so I don't like ragging on Proton DB. The short version is, can Linux be an alternative for your Windows gaming? And this one, it depends on the style of gaming you do. That's the answer. Depends on your style of gaming. If you rely on kernel level anti-cheats, generally the answer is going to be a big giant fuck no. I'm looking at things like LOL, Valorant, etc. that don't like to play nice. So yeah, it all really depends. If generally, though, you just like playing games, though I will say the one thing I did notice is he didn't filter for PC, he filtered for Steam Deck, which is an entirely different conversation altogether because that's a fixed platform. But what I will say is the issues that he can talk about I know I can speak from experience on that. Like on this system, it's an all AMD system with a 5900 Ryzen 7 5900 and a 6600M, which is 8 gigs of RAM. But like when I go to play like Horizon Forbidden West or Zero Dawn, renders fine, but the problem boils down to like character movement. Like the scene moves at 60, but the character moves at 30. So it's like this weird like water effect. And I've tried every setting, every different thing that I can think of. And I've looked at ProtonDB for people with similar specs and hardware, etc., and all the reports. Ain't finding it. So I just don't play Horizon Zero Dawn or Forbidden West. I play it on, this thing instead. It is what it is as far as that. So, but I've also experienced issues with games in Windows. I'm looking at Fallout, 4, 3, New Vegas, that they conveniently updated after, 12 years of not touching it because Microsoft or, publishers or whatever. So it's all relative to what you play, honestly, as far as what you expect from your gaming experience. What I will say is that the gaming experience on Linux is a shit ton better than it is on Mac. So if anybody tells you they game on a Mac, I question their gaming because yikes. Anyway, that's my take on the gaming aspect.
The sort of jury's out a little bit on the gaming front. I think it has come on quite a lot, but will it be a trouble-free experience for you? Probably not. And, if you're looking for a system to replace Windows altogether for an out-and-out gaming system, then the answer to that is probably not just yet. Now, the problem is not with Linux. It's to do with, say, anti-cheats and other things like that are causing problems with some games. So bear that in mind. If you're looking for trouble-free gaming on every single game on the platform, then you're not going to get it. That's not to bash Linux in any way, shape or form, because I think it's come on quite a lot on the gaming side of things, but it's just not there just yet for replacing Windows as an out-and-out gaming system, in my personal opinion. So let me finish off by just saying this, with these couple of simple things to remember before you make the change. If there is any type of software or game that you need to play or you need to use for any particular reason and you can't drop it and it's not on Linux, then don't switch, because you are going to be very disappointed and you are not going to be able to adapt. You have to learn to adapt to Linux operating system, and you have to learn to adapt with the software that's available.
So that applies to anything, though. Yeah, any type of switch, you have to be. There has to be a willingness to learn and adapt to. So, if you're already looking at an alternative OSs, you're willing at least to learn and adapt. Because most people who've spent all their entirety in Windows and jump to a Mac, just certain elements about a Mac are going to confuddle and confuse the fuck out of them, and that's being generous. Oh, what do you mean when I click the close window button? Windows, it closes, it kills the program. Mac OS, it kind of depends on the application. It might minimize it. It might still be running. It insert thing here. Whatever. There's just ways and functions that it doesn't work. Oh, you want to use X application. It's not available. Now you got to find an alternative. So it's like, if you're already in that spectrum of stuff, you're going to have to be willing, and you are probably more than willing, to look at alternatives and kind of think in a different way, because you're going to be at least understanding that it's going to be different. At least that's the hope. As far as applications, again, I personally tell people, find what works on everything, and then you won't be missing anything. Because realistically, that's the whole point. The OS should not get in your way. Like for me, the reason I use Garuda, it doesn't get in my way. It fast tracks all the shit that I need to do and would have to do if I spent doing Arch the right way. So for me, this Garuda is the best way to go about it. It really depends on the user, but I would say the best way is to make the hurdles so that they're even less. And that we don't do that far too often as far as applications and stuff.
Available on there. And there is tons of software on Linux, and you're just going to have to get used to a different operating system and the way it works. It's that simple. The other thing that you're going to have to learn is patience and time to learn this new operating system, because it's not like Windows whatsoever, and you will need to start learning new things. And if you're one of these people that don't have the patience and you don't want to learn new software and new things about a new operating system, then maybe Linux is not for you. You just have to accept the fact that it's going to be a process and it's going to take time to get comfortable with this new operating system and the software that this operating system has to offer. And you can't keep comparing it with Windows because it's not the same. So all you need to do now is choose the distro of your choice and use it. And there's plenty of them to choose from, believe you me. And again, if you start looking online, what is the best distro to use, you're going to see a lot of conflicting information which will confuse you. Just choose the one you like, the look of, and go with it and start using it. It's that simple. It's completely free. And again, you can install it on your system. And if you don't like it, you can always go back to Windows, or you can choose another flavor of Linux. There's plenty of them to choose from. If you have any other questions online, you can always jump in the Discord server and ask some questions on there, or leave a comment down below. There might be some Linux people down there that will be happy to answer your questions. My name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Just want to say a quick shout out to all my YouTube members who joined my YouTube members group. I really do appreciate the support. I shall catch you in the very next video, or I'll see you on the Discord server for a chat. Have a lovely day. Bye for now.
So generally, I have nothing bad to say about his takes. Again, for me, how you come to Linux really does matter as far as like your mind frame and your state of mind and your willingness to change things, because there's going to be a lot of change. But if you're already looking at alternatives, even if you were going from iPhone to if you're going from iOS to Android or Android to iOS, you're already in the sphere of willingness to adapt, even if something's similar, but still understanding is going to be different. A lot of the problem, and I'm not going to lie, tends to fall on us when we tell people about Linux and decide to use probably not the best terminology of like, oh, it's a replacement. It's like, fuck you, drop the ball right there. Because replacement means a one-to-one to a lot of people, or a cheaper one-to-one. Either way, there's like that one-to-one comparison. Alternative tends to spark, oh, alternative. The definition for alternative, it means it's going to be similar but different kind of deal. So the expectation is not a one-to-one of what their experience is. And that's what matters. And we sell it a lot of the times as that one-to-one. We don't sell it as a one-to-one to macOS because macOS is kind of its own fucking thing. But like for Windows, we oversell a lot and underdeliver a lot when we set the expectations too high. So, like with the gaming stuff, if it's gaming, cool. What style of gaming do you do? This is why I say tailor distro recommendations based on the demographic that distros are aiming fucking for. And tailor your advice, despite your biases, to that demographic. Because that's what matters. Putting the right tools to the people that need them and to the right people matter far more than whatever fucking philosophical bullshit that some biases you might have about X, Y, or Z. It really does. So at the end of the day, I don't really have anything to complain about as far as his recommendations and stuff, because I agree with most of them. So I don't know. What are your guys' take? Do you agree, disagree? Or should we be evangelizing all about the fucking freedoms, or should we be more pragmatic and being like, you don't get spied on, and you actually control the OS, and Linux puts the PC back in personal in Linux, I should say. PC doesn't stand for politically correct. It stands for personal computing because it puts the personal back in computing. And to me, I fall into that latter category. The freedoms are nice, but the control is far more important. So you guys want to do, comment, rate, subscribe, all that fun jazz, and you got on the Patreon and all that crap is down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.